along with Arrested Development, I found interesting that they have a term called the Peter Pan syndrome. So the Peter Pan syndrome is just that you are not able to control your sensations and you don't want responsibility. You just want to be a child and you just want to play forever. If you remember Peter Pan on the island with his friends, he wasn't being responsible. He wasn't trying to be a husband. He wasn't being a father. He had friends and he was being a child and he was on an adventure and life was good. He, wasn't like a 9 to 5. He wasn't being sacrificial and serving and doing all the things that God has designed men to do, but he was enjoying himself. It would be like our Peter Pans of today who just want to play video games and who just want to hang out with their friends and they're not interested in getting married. They just want to live with their parents forever and they don't want the responsibility and they don't control their sensations. If they want to just have sex and not be married and just masturbate and watch pornography, that is part of the Peter Pan syndrome. We know that Michael Jackson was accused of having the Peter Pan syndrome because he just wanted to have Neverland, wherever it was called. He had toys, animals. He just wanted to relive his childhood. And so that can be the result, again, of trauma. I'm not saying Michael Jackson was sexually abused, but there's other traumas that could cause you to be arrested in your development and your ability to make good decisions and your ability to have healthy attachment. And if you don't have healthy attachment, it's going to impact your sex map. Because you won't understand that the first stop to Pleasure Island is healthy attachment. And so to have healthy attachment, you have to be able to attach. You have to be emotionally mature, cognitively mature. And if you're not, and if you're disconnected and if you're anxious and you don't feel connected, then that puts you on the pathway of just having sex without the desire to connect. So again, Arrested Develop, it's when you have a frozen development at the age of the traumatic experience. So if you were 6 and you were removed suddenly out of your parents' care and now you're in this foster care and you don't have the emotional capacity to deal with the pressure of missing your family, being afraid, because children are not supposed to be exposed to those extreme emotions. So it becomes traumatic. And what they do is they split. They emotionally encapsulate that emotional development. They emotionally are stunted, and that is encapsulated and frozen while they chronologically grow. They may get taller. They may be mature in other areas, but they never learned how to emotionally deal with feelings, big feelings and big circumstances. And you can replace that with anything. If you were sexually abused, you didn't have the emotional maturity to deal with the sadness, the shame, and the anger, and the loss, and all of those confusing feelings. So what happens is that you become frozen at that age. And it makes it difficult because you are stuck right there and everything you know about sex is stuck right there. So the thing is that we have to remember is moving forward and being unstuck, that is going to be a process of development and changing your attachment style and first being aware of what has happened to you and acknowledging I was arrested at this age. And you can ask yourself, looking back at the trauma and looking back at traumatic things that happened in your life, big emotional events, things that stimulated a big emotional responses. How did I handle that? Because if you look at that and you look at how you handle things today, it's probably paralleled. It's probably the same. And it's not your fault. It's nothing to be ashamed of. But if you're not able to manage your emotions, it comes from somewhere. Because as you were growing up, you were supposed to emotionally mature. But in trauma, the fear of just that emotion makes you not want to feel it all. So you just kind of shut the door on emotions. And although they seep out, your desire is not to deal with them. So that's really important. And so when you're dealing with someone who has someone who deals with pedophilia, that is either arrested development or the evil intentions of adults that I talked about. Sometimes it could be that they were sexually abused and so their love map is twisted, but sometimes pedophilia can be about just wanting to enslave and to harm children. And the pleasure comes from the harming, not necessarily just the sexual activity, but being empowered and having subjects and just having that ability to have authority over someone who's smaller than you. So that's the two kind of evils that we have to look at. And I'm not focusing on that as much. That's psychopathic pedophilia. And in the criminal, it's both are criminal, but that is definitely another episode and another conversation that we probably in the future can touch on. But I want to get back to this and the remapping and the of the sex maps and the arrested development. The tricky thing that happens in the arrested development is that you can become accustomed to and so familiarized with this type of treatment and activity that it becomes a way of attachment and connection. There's a term called Stockholm Syndrome, and we can use it for this because initially, follow me, initially, you may have been drugged in the car and taken to Pleasure Island and abused. But what happens over the course of time, because you're a child and you don't have judgment or insight, and you're just looking at the sensation of your brain is remembering the human connection and the pleasure, and it could be splitting. Part of you don't like it, part of you feel like it's not good, but then there is a part of you that your body is responding to, and so you begin to have an attraction or have a connection with the person who is taking you to Pleasure Island, the Pleasure Island of sexual abuse, the Pleasure Island that is not healthy. And so you may feel like I am guilty or something's wrong with me because I got in the car. At first they took me in the car and took me to Pleasure Island, but then I became a willing participant or I sent cues that I want to go to Pleasure Island. And so that becomes really confusing as well, where now you have an affinity, you've drawn a relationship with the person who is taking you to Pleasure Island and causing these distorted love map connections, bonds to build. And you have to forgive yourself. You have to get to the place where you can go to therapy and you as an adult can look at you as a child and get information as an adult to bring back to your child and let that child know that you were disorganized in your behavior and in your direction because you were a child and you should have never been on the road or you should have never visited Pleasure Island. And so now you have to remap and you have to reframe and you have to change renew your mind, as the Bible would say. But the first step is just identifying that sometimes you get a connection to the person who took you to Pleasure Island. And it could have been a family member, a sibling, a cousin, a neighbor, a coach, a pastor. And it's very natural to build connection with someone that you're traveling with. Even when you're doing something wrong, you could share shame, you can share secrecy, and that bond makes you feel even more connected. Now, I'm not saying that's always the case, but in a lot of cases, that is the case. More so when the person is violent, beating you, and just not showing love. That's different, and that goes with that other psychopathic pedophilia type of thing we talked about. But for most people, they experience that interaction in a way that can be so confusing because on Sunday he's your pastor, on Monday through Sunday, or he's your father, or he's your sibling. So it's not always a bad relationship. It confuses that I enjoy this person or I love this person, but sometimes we go to Pleasure Island and now we share guilt and shame, and we share secrecy, because pedophilia is always, that type of pedophilia or unauthorized sex, it's always connected to secrecy.